Almost every app you build has three parts. First, data, normally stored in a database, a user interface, text and buttons and stuff, and logic. This logic will connect your user interface to your backend, your data. So when the user clicks on something, this is what you want your app to do. Maybe submit a form or trigger an animation. And this is so common in software, we have a name for it. It's called Model View Controller, or MVC. The model is the data part, the view is the UI, and the C is the controller, the logic. And in FlutterFlow, you set up your logic, you control your logic in this tab here in your action flow editor. So in this video, we're going to talk about the logic, the action flow editor, how to use it, and what are the types of actions you're going to need. There are 3 steps to setting up logic or actions in FlutterFlow. You select the element, the trigger, and the action. So first, the element. When you want to run some action or some logic, you need to select what element you want it to trigger on. So maybe you want it triggered on the page. So you would select that and then add an action. Or maybe you want it on a button. And so you select the button and then add an action. So these actions get attached to whatever element you have selected. And you can see that in the widget tree because this green icon will be added next to whatever widget, whatever element you attach that action to. So we have 2 here. That's the first step, selecting the element, attaching the action to an element. The next step is selecting the trigger. And you can see that right here. So I've attached this action to this floating action button, and then we're given some options for the type of trigger that will trigger our action. And on this, we have 3 options: on tap, double tap, and long press. But these triggers will be contextual. So different elements that you attach actions to will have different types of triggers. So we added one to this root widget or this root page right here. And you can see we have different ones. So we have on page load and on phone shake. And so we have different ones there. Similarly, different widgets will have their own actions. And this makes sense. So if we have a page view here, that's that widget where you can swipe through. Well, that's going to have a swipe action. You see right there, on page swipe. Okay, so that's the first 2 steps. Attaching the action to an element and then selecting the trigger that you want to kick off the logic. Finally, the last step, and the obvious one, it's selecting whatever action you want to execute. Okay, well, what logic, what actions do we have available to us? Well, you have all of these right here, and these are just folders, and they'll contain all of the individual actions you have. And we selected these ones because these are going to cover 98% of the type of actions that every app needs. But if you can't find the type of action you're looking for there, we've got this last custom action that you can create yourself and then add into your action chain. All right, so let's just define an action here. So maybe we want to navigate to a different page. Let's just click this sign up right here. And when you select an action, you'll then be able to see the options available to you with that action. So with this navigate action, I can select the page. I can enable or disable back navigation. So that's if the user swipes left, will that bring them back? I can change the behavior of that back action. So maybe I want to route them to a different page, select the transition type. If I want to pass any data to the page I'm navigating to, I can set that up right here. And these are the properties available to this specific action. If I select a different action, so maybe I want to come in here, and maybe I want to show a bottom sheet, I'm going to see different options available to me. You also have the ability, if you come into these 3 dots, to copy the action, delete the action, and I'll show you what this disable action means in a second. Now, if you just have one action, so just showing the bottom sheet and nothing else, then you're done. But often when you're defining actions, you have multiple steps, multiple actions that you need to take. So maybe I want to show a bottom sheet and then trigger an animation or update a local state variable. Well, if you have multiple actions, then you want to open this action flow editor, and you'll get this pop-up that gives you a lot more room to compose your logic. Now we have everything the same as before, it's just moved around a little bit. So the triggers are now up here. So right now we're defining the logic for the onTap event. But if we click onto the onDoubleTap, then we have a whole new blank slate to define our logic. All right, let's come back here. And when you select the action, you're going to see all the options you had available just like before. But now I can click this and add another action. So add another action, and let's maybe update a page state variable. Now, keep in mind that the way these will execute is they'll execute one at a time, and each action will finish or resolve before the next one executes. These are asynchronous. Now, if you want to reorder the actions you've defined, you can just click this arrow and it'll move it up. So now we have that up there, or move it down. And also you have the ability to disable actions. So now when I test this app, it'll only execute the active actions. And this doesn't stop the action flow. So if I copy this action and paste it in here, it's just going to skip over this action. This can be helpful when you're making a call to another service that maybe you're paying for, or maybe it's mutating some data you don't want to keep doing over and over again. Now, often you're only going to want to execute some logic if some condition is true. So for instance, maybe you have certain roles in your app. So if the user is an admin, they'll be allowed to take some action. And you can accomplish that by using a conditional. So here we have add conditional, and let's move this up to the top of the chain. So before any of this logic executes, it's going to check for some condition that you can set here. And if it's true, it will execute this branch. And if it's false, it'll execute this branch. Keep in mind too, that this will continue to execute after these true or false conditions, unless you add a terminate. Another helper utility we have is looping. So we can add a loop in here, and this is the equivalent to a while loop. So whatever is inside this block here will continue to execute as long as whatever expression you have in here evaluates to true. Okay, let's get rid of some of these and look at some of the actions. So let's come into here and just close these up. So first, we've got a bunch of navigation options, navigate to particular pages or navigate back. We have a whole category of backend utilities, and this will include all of your CRUD operations as well as authentication. Next, we've got state management, so updating or resetting state variables or resetting form fields. Then we've got a whole category of actions relating to particular widgets. For instance, when we were looking at the example of the page view, we could respond to a page view trigger, a page swipe, but we can also control the page view. And we have a lot of other options in here. Next, we have some alerts and notifications, including push notifications. And notice that this is grayed out, and that's because we haven't set up push notifications in this project yet. So this will be available, and any other ones that you see grayed out, once you enable that service. Next, we've got some utilities like uploading data, copying to clipboard, and other types of utilities. And we've got animation, including widget animations we've defined in FlutterFlow's animation engine or Lottie or Rive animations. Next, we've got any integrations you might have for payments or ads. Next, we've got action blocks, which are collections of reusable actions. And finally, any custom actions that you've created. Now, one important thing to know is that some actions will return a value. So let me show you that and why that's important. So we're going to add an action here, and we're going to add in an API call. And right here, we can see this action output variable name. So any API makes a call to a service and gets back some data, some JSON normally. And FlutterFlow will dump that data into a variable. So we can just call this response. And now this variable is available to you anywhere in FlutterFlow. So maybe down here, we want to check for some conditional. Maybe we're checking for something in that response, and we can access that value with these action outputs. So there's our response. That's what we named it. But we can also access that outside the action flow editor. So maybe I want to come into my text right here and come to my set from variable, and we have that same option, action outputs response. This is helpful because you might think that you have to write those responses to a local state variable or maybe stored in your backend somewhere. And sometimes you do, but not always. And that's because you have access to it in your action outputs. Lastly, let's just set up some common actions you're going to use. Okay, so let's get out of here, cancel out of here, come back into our button right here, and just let's get rid of all this logic. And you can do that by coming in here and deleting a single action, which would delete just this one, or the whole action chain, which is what I want to do here. So now it's empty. Okay, great. And I've got a page set up for signing up. And so let's just sign up a user. So we are going to open this up because I know I'm going to need some more space. I'm going to add an action here, and it's going to be an auth action. So I can just search for auth and create account. My auth provider is going to be email, and this is looking for email, password, and confirm password fields. Well, I already have these set up here, and I've named them in here. And if any part of this is confusing, we have documentation and videos on each of these specific actions. I just want to give you some quick demos here of the most common actions you're going to use. And this is available to me because I already have Firebase and authentication set up on this project. Okay, so we're going to come in here and it recognizes that email field. So I'm going to select that, and the password field, it recognizes that, and the confirm password. Great. And I want to create a users document, and it's the users collection I want to set in there. Awesome. Okay, so I've authenticated the user, but normally you want to send your user to another page after you authenticate them. And so we want to navigate them. So let's just add an action. We want to navigate them to our feed page. And I'm going to disable allow back action because I don't want to give them the ability to swipe back to that sign up page. And that's it. And like I said before, this auth action has to resolve successfully before we navigate. So if something is wrong, like for instance, if our password and password confirmation don't match, they'll just get a little toast, a little pop-up at the bottom that says that they don't match, and they'll have to do it again. So this action will only execute if the authentication is successful. Cool, let's try it out. And to try out any logic, you have to run it in a test mode. But before then, let's just fix some errors right here. I just got to get rid of that action because nothing is defined. Okay, great. Let's test it out. Okay, let's put in our email and password and create account. Beautiful. So we authenticated the user and then navigated them to this page. Let's do one more common action, and that's to show a bottom sheet. So when the user clicks on this button, we'll see a little pop-up post UI. Okay, so let's go to our button right here. Remember, our first step is to select the element to add the logic to. We're going to add an action. It's going to be a bottom sheet. We're going to show it. Then we have to select which component we want to be the bottom sheet. I already have one set up here called add post, so I'm going to select that. And I'm going to enable drag so that the user can pull it down if they want to change their mind. Okay, let's take a look at that. Here we go. Let's click on it. Beautiful. Bottom sheet, and let's pull it away. Love that. So that's how to define logic in the action flow editor.